Greetings and aloha to everyone out there. Welcome to another edition of the Holistic Human Optimization Show. I am your host, Ronnie Landis. Today I am joined by a special guest, my friend Jenna Rose Longoria, who is a board-certified holistic practitioner, a wellness coach, and a woman on a mission to really help women worldwide regain health in a multitude of different ways. And I'm going to let her explain a lot more about that. Really excited to have you on, Jenna. We have some really cool things to talk about, some areas of health and wellness, whether it be men or women. I think this is a universal conversation, especially when we talk about hormonal health, but specifically women's health. This is something that I've really been looking into for many years. Most of the people that follow me are women, probably 80%, if not more. And a lot of men that are interested in women's health, interestingly enough. It's a theme that's going on in the world. And so I'm really excited to have you on. How are you doing?
Hey, Ronnie, I'm great. Happy to speak about this subject because, as you said, I'm on a mission. It's a message I want to spread. So, yeah, doing well.
Cool. Yeah. So speaking of your mission, I'd love to start off by just talking about your mission and how you got into this field.
Yeah. So, I struggled with depression growing up and weight gain. And at the age of 14, actually, I had my first ovarian cyst. So the doctors put me on the birth control pill at the young age of 14. So that really escalated into more depression, more weight gain. I wasn't really getting to the root of the problem. So I always knew something was off, but I didn't really know. So after getting on the birth control pill, I noticed my mind shifted. It was like I was seeing in a different color. I just couldn't describe it. I didn't feel connected, and I knew that I wasn't living my authentic life. So I stayed on the birth control pill until I was about 21. And I had always, yo-yo dieted, always struggled with my weight, had issues keeping it off. So I did every fad diet out there, always struggled with depression and eating disorders. And finally, at the age of 21, I was like, no more, just something, my intuition. I was a journalism major at the time, like health wasn't even on my radar. And something was in a voice inside my head was like, get off the birth control pill. And so I did. I got off the birth control pill and I didn't have a period for 6 months. Yeah, it was a long time. And I broke out. I had acne. I had back knee. It was horrible. And I wasn't feeling too well. I was feeling better in the sense that like this, I was seeing more colors and I was starting to feel more like myself. My taste in men was changing, my taste in literature, my taste in friends, like everything. I no longer desired to just go out and get wasted and go out with college friends. Like I was desiring to be more out in nature and like everything lifted. However, my period wasn't coming back yet. So I went to the doctor and I asked, that's what I knew back then was go to the doctor. If there was something wrong, you go to the doctor. And, he barely even looks me in the eye and he's like, okay, 6 months, no problem. We'll fix that. And I said, I was very hopeful. And he gave me a prescription for the birth control pill. And I was like, what is this? And he was like, well, this will give you a period again. And I was like, no, you don't understand. I want my body to have a period on its own. I want to make my own hormones. And he looked at me and he said, why? And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I'm so happy he did that because it changed the course of my life. And I since have studied everything I know about it and eventually found out that what I had that was causing the weight gain and the depression is something called polycystic ovarian syndrome. So once I had a diagnosis and I could start treating that, my life has just exponentially changed, and I'm just so thankful. So it's my mission to help other women know that the birth control pill is not their only option, that it's just treating the symptom, not the root cause, and just empower women. I mean, obviously, I know that a birth control pill or hormonal birth control can have a time or a place. If a child is not on someone's radar, then if I'm not judging, But I do think it's important that we're empowered with all the information and all the knowledge before just going to a doctor and being told that's our only option. So my goal is to actually just empower women with the knowledge about all their birth control options, which I do in addition to the health and lifestyle coaching that I do. We talk about the birth control options. We talk about the pros and cons so they can make the choice for themselves. I'm not telling them what they need to do.
Right. Yeah. And this is something that's definitely near and dear to my heart. About 6 years ago, I got into a subject called estrogen dominance and really dove deep into this in every little nook and cranny, the implications of environmental xenoestrogen toxicity, pesticides of all kinds,
yes, absolutely,
chemical fertilizers, PCBs, phthalates, plasticizers, and then also going down into the pharmaceutical side of things and the prescription drugs and the birth control pills and bioidentical hormones, hormonal therapy, et cetera, and all the chemical effects or the chemical cocktails that are being prescribed to people to reroute their hormones, but not really building back the precursors for building the blocks of their hormone production. Like you said, you wanted to create your own natural hormones somehow in your, I don't know, feminine, intuitive intelligence. Something was like, you know what, my body's probably intelligent enough, and it's probably a natural phenomena where my body would produce its own hormones. So it sounds like to me, something didn't quite click. And I think that's amazing. Like you said, that's really a gift that your doctor was so out of touch to reflect that to you in a form of kind of an absurd type of question where it was like, whoa, okay, yeah, thank you so much.
He looked at me like I was crazy, which I've gotten that look before, that wasn't the first time, but that time I knew I wasn't crazy. No, but I mean, he looked at me like, why does this woman want to have her own period? Like, what, this pill is going to do everything for her. And, and what we know now, it's quite common, like with what you said, the estrogen dominance. Like whenever I have a client come to me, I just assume that they're going to have estrogen dominance because it's so prevalent. We live in an estrogen dominant world, with the xenoestrogens, and it's just a toxic world. All the toiletries and all the chemicals we're putting on our bodies, the BPA and the plastic bottles and the aluminum. And what I was suffering from was something called post-birth control syndrome, which was actually just recently coined by Dr. Jolene Brighton. And she's been a trailblazer in this. And it's basically your body is withdrawing, is the pill cuts off your communication between your brain and your ovaries. So when that happens, your body kind of goes on vacation. It knows it doesn't need to make any hormones. Everything's done for you. So when you get off the birth control pill, they don't automatically start talking to each other once again. It's kind of like you got to go on a date first and then court each other and then establish that communication. They don't just go back to normal. I mean, it does happen, but in most cases, it takes a while. And post-birth control syndrome happens anywhere from 3 months to 1 year. And if you're proactive with it and you take the right diet and lifestyle choices and make these changes in your life, then you can detox from the pill, at an accelerated rate versus what I didn't know. I was just doing everything the same and I had no idea. It wasn't even on my radar. So nowadays we know so much more about it, which is great for females everywhere.
Yeah, well, I definitely wanted to ask you about that post-birth control syndrome. This is definitely a term that it's just recently come on my radar, and you really brought that up too. And I wanted to definitely dive into that. You already brought that up, and I also wanted to add on to that the side effects of birth control pills and like the reality, the implications, like why somebody would want to consider doing a lot more research or just completely omit that altogether, because birth control pills definitely have some serious repercussions, as most of us are well aware of, but a lot of people may not be.
Absolutely. And, today is actually a very exciting day in the world of birth control and a big win for the United States because the birth control method called eSure, that it's transplanted in the arm, was actually just taken off the market in the United States. Every other country in the world has taken it off years ago because there have been fatalities women left infertile. It's made by the Bayer company. And the biggest slap in the face to women who have suffered from this was the Bayer company said, oh, well, we took it off the market because of declining cells. They still refuse to say that it did any harm. But anyway, yay, the US has finally banned it. Doctors can't prescribe it anymore. So that's great. So that's one of the most fatal forms of birth control. But with other birth control, like there's an increased risk of stroke, which that's not hidden. That's on the package, right? But things like depression. There was a huge article in JAMA, Denmark, a study in Copenhagen, and they were showing how many women, how prevalent depression is with the birth control pill. Leading up to weight gain, infertility. When getting off, 1 in 8 women experiences infertility after getting off the birth control pill, because sometimes those hormones that communication, as I was talking about the brain and the ovaries, sometimes that's never reestablished, right? Interestingly enough, they're blaming some research studies are blaming the birth control on the high divorce rates, because when you're on the birth control pill, you're choosing a mate based on completely different hormones. Right. And then you get off the birth control pill when you're trying to conceive and you're like, oh, wait, who did I marry? Which I can completely relate to, because the type of guy that I was attracted to when I was on the birth control pill was a completely different type of guy that I felt was a right partner for me when I got off the birth control pill. So all those different, the list goes on and on with the side effects from the birth control pill. Oh, leaky gut is one of the big ones. It destroys the body's ability to absorb nutrients. So a lot of times women on birth control pill are, nutrient deficient in zinc, selenium, B12. Maybe they're eating the right diet, but their body cannot absorb it. They're not digesting it. So that's crucial. If women who are choosing the hormonal birth control pill need to definitely be supplementing and getting on a whole foods diet and supplementing, so they make sure they're kind of counterbalancing.
That's really interesting. I mean, you said a number of really, really intriguing things. One of them, this leaky gut syndrome. I'm really curious what the mechanism is that in relation to birth control. Like, is it causing inflammation of the intestinal lining? Is it leading to the permeability of the lining? I've never heard that connection before.
Yes, I think it's causing inflammation, and also because the woman's not ovulating. So when you're on the birth control pill, you're not ovulating. And the only way that women can make progesterone, which is what I call nature's Xanax, is when you ovulate. So if you're on the birth control pill, you're not ovulating. You're just pumped with synthetic estrogen, which is inflammatory to the body. Progesterone helps keep your body, helps your mood and helps your skin, helps your hair, your nails, your intestinal lining. So if you're not making this key hormone, then you're going to suffer from inflammation and leaky gut.
That is super fascinating. One of the things that just came up, you're talking about progesterone. When, especially for the audience listening, this term estrogen dominance in layman's terms is really just a phenomena where certain types of estrogens have been inverted, or your hormone cascade has basically been inverted in the dominant youthful juvenile hormones, which are the hormones that you have when you're in your most juvenile state of being, which is when you're young, pre-puberty, or when you're in that puberty state. And like for a girl, for example, when she goes through puberty, her estradiol, which is like a steroidal form of estrogen, is at its highest and creates that growth spurt. One of the things that I've been really seeing a lot with a lot of my clients are just people that are, that have different forms of breast cancer. They have high levels of estriol, which is creating a growth. And that's not what you want when you're older. You want that when you're in that puberty state, but you don't want that later on. And so that in your progesterone in a woman basically gets suppressed or aromatized. And the same thing happens in men too, where their testosterone.
Yes, absolutely. You see men walking around with men boobs. That's estrogen dominance.
Yeah.
Right there. It's happening to men and women. And you're right. Like estrogen is tissue forming. It's a growth hormone, right? So that is where cancer comes from. If you have too much estrogen, then these cancerous cells you're promoting their growth. So it's very important to keep that estrogen in a balanced state.
Yeah. And so the birth control connection to that, basically, and I really want to just get your take on it. So the birth control is really, how do you say, accelerating that inverted cascade.
Absolutely, because it's just pumping your body with synthetic estrogen. So, I mean, not all of the birth control, there's different types of birth controls, but the birth control pill, most of them, it's just synthetic estrogen. And so you're already living in this estrogen dominant world. And then here you are taking a pill every day with more estrogen. So, I mean,
Right.
no wonder, you get when a big signal that you have it is, holding on to water weight, bloating, constipation, breasts that get really sore and tender, especially right up to your period. Like, it shouldn't be like that, right? You shouldn't have to, if anything hits you, you shouldn't be in pain. And then, you see it in men too, walking around with, you see these man boobs that we see around, that's estrogen dominance. It's not just hitting the female population, it's the male population as well. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is a really fascinating conversation with a lot of nuances and twists and turns. One of the things I was thinking about is the whole conversation around natural based, yam based, or bioidentical progesterone cream, and
Yes.
how powerful that can be for starting to get that balancing process going.
It is very powerful, but and the bioidentical is the best form. So yam-based or Natural Woman is the one I use, and I'm not making commission or anything. I'm not plugging it in. That's just, you can get it on Amazon, and it was formulated by a doctor. I don't know his story, but anyway, he's a big pioneer in women's health. But progesterone cream is one of those things that it's best to try the diet and lifestyle changes first. Because a progesterone cream is kind of just putting a Band-Aid on it. So yeah, it's going to give you more progesterone and it's going to kind of even things out, make you feel better. But first you want to get to the root cause of, why am I not making progesterone? Why am I not ovulating? And seeing if you can fix those factors first. And in some cases, women, they're just stubborn, whether it be from the environment, exposure to toxins at a young age, or genetic factors. Sometimes certain women just need a little help from progesterone cream. And it does help. So it's a great tool to have up our sleeves and for women's health.
Right. I think it might've been Dr. John Lee, the man
John
who
Lee, yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I couldn't think of his name. Definitely. And topical is much better because studies are shown that if you ingest it, it doesn't really translate as well.
Yeah, doesn't convert over. Yeah, definitely. Well, that his work really opened my eyes. And this is back in like the 70s and 80s. He put out the book, What Your Doctor Doesn't Know About Menopause. And, his story is basically like he had all these postmenopausal, premenopausal, like all the different stages of menopause, all the like erratic kind of conditions of women showing up on his doorstep. And he just he started experimenting with yam-based progesterone cream. And then he started to notice like all these women, all their issues start to normalize and come back into check. So that's why I bring that in.
Yeah, because absolutely. Like curing anxiety, depression. So instead of going and getting Prozac or Xanax or whatever, the progesterone cream, try that. It definitely is good to work in tandem with a health practitioner, because getting the dose right is important, because you can have too much progesterone with doing the cream, and then it can also make symptoms that mimic kind of estrogen dominant. So you have to get the right balance. But it can change everything. It's miraculous.
Yeah, exactly. And, by the way, just for everyone listening, we're not talking about hormone replacement therapy where they inject exogenous hormones. We're talking about something that's biologically identical to your endogenous hormone, to jumpstart the system back on. And then, so once we've done that, Jenna, then what is the approach that you take people through?
So if the cream is working and they're ovulating again, sometimes you can transition off of the progesterone cream. If you change your body to ovulate again, because once you ovulate, you're making more progesterone to put into your bank, basically. So once you're consistently ovulating and you have enough progesterone, then you might not need the cream anymore. Unless, women who once they get pregnant, you wouldn't want to just get right off the progesterone cream, because then that could create a miscarriage, because you need to have enough progesterone. You don't want to change anything once you get pregnant, because that's what progesterone is. It enables the body to carry a baby. So
Progestation.
yes, exactly. So that's the whole point of it. But it's important. So, I saw a funny meme the other day from Dr. Laura Briden, and it was a picture of a guy, and he was like, I'm not trying to have babies. Why do I need testosterone? And I was like, oh, that's so funny, right? Like, they wouldn't give a man a birth control pill that got rid of all of his testosterone just because he's not trying to conceive. And it's the same thing for women. It's like, oh, well, just because, we need our progesterone all the time, even if we're not wanting to have babies or not. That's
Right.
crucial to our health. And the
Well,
birth control pill is completely, not all of them. There are some forms that you still ovulate, and that's the copper IUD.
okay. Yeah.
And so, like, if a woman's ever like, okay, not going to do the fertility awareness method or whatever, if she's not, the copper IUD still has its drawbacks and links to depression and scarring, but there are no hormones. It's a hormonal-free contraceptive, method. So you're still ovulating on that, which is the pro of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but even with the copper IUD, it still has these potential. I mean, I've heard some horror stories
Yes.
from people that have had it like pushed in too far, or they've had to have it like somehow, I don't know, surgically removed. They've had to have like a whole thing just to have it removed or to get themselves back into balance.
Yeah, it can cause scar tissue, and then, it can leave you infertile. It's linked to depression. It's linked to very heavy periods, copper toxicity. So anyone who's taking the copper IUD needs to be supplementing with zinc to make sure there's the right balance there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a con to all of them, except fertility awareness methods. So
Right. Yeah. Fascinating. So I want to shift this conversation over into ovulation.
Great. I love ovulation. It's my favorite.
Okay. Yeah. I had a feeling about that. So, and this is a topic that hasn't really been too explored into detail on this show yet. So I'd love to really just kind of hand that over to you. Since you are the expert on this subject. I'm definitely not. So I'd love to hand that over.
Not yet.
Not yet. Yeah. In terms of like, how important is ovulation, and what do we all need to know about that?
Okay. So yeah, ovulation to me is a real superhero. It is the star of the show. We always focus on the period, and because it's easy to know when you had your period, you can't ignore that. You're like, okay, I started my period today. But a lot of women don't track if or when they're ovulating. And I encourage women to do that, because that is the most important part of the whole cycle, is the ovulation. Because we were just talking about progesterone, and the only way you can make progesterone is if you ovulate. So that's number one. You need to make the progesterone so you can have, women who don't make progesterone get, anxiety, they can get moodiness, PMS, period pain, because the progesterone is not counterbalancing the estrogen. So ovulation is a rock star. That's how we get that's how us women get our superhero strength, basically. We need that progesterone so we can have resilience to stress. So we can multitask, we can manage everything. We can be the goddesses that we are and be in tune with the rhythm, right, of the universe. Because if we're not ovulating, we're not doing that. And so unfortunately, we live in a world of unprecedented stress. It's everywhere. Women nowadays, more women are working. They have high demanding schedules. We're boss babes, right? We have got a lot going on. We're mothers, we're daughters, we're wives, we're, so we have iPhones. We're constantly being contacted by email on the phone, an alert on the computer. So we're being pulled in all these different directions. And unfortunately, we haven't evolved in the way to our brain doesn't perceive that as a threat, like a saber-toothed tiger. So every time a ding goes off on your phone, you're just like, you're stressed out. The body makes more cortisol. So these things are some that they can impede the body's ability to ovulate. So it's a good way to keep in check. It's your report card for the month if you've ovulated. So knowing when you're ovulating is actually really easy if you just kind of if you just observe your body and you are in tune with your body. I'm a big fan of apps. Nowadays, it's easier than ever because we have all these apps on the phone. So the phones can be our friends or our foes, right? But in this way, they can be our friend, right? I like the Kandara app. That's a good one. However, it is very important that women realize that if you have one of these apps, it's a fertility awareness app, and you are not putting your temperature in, then it is not fertility awareness. It is just the rhythm method, which I call wait and pray, because it is not effective. It is not scientifically effective. You're just kind of chancing it, basically, because one day can make all the difference. So for example, on these apps, the typical women, which in the medical textbooks, according to the medical textbooks, we all ovulate on day 14. All of us, every single one of us. There's no variance to that whatsoever. However, there is, because not all of us ovulate on day 14. That's BS.
And those textbooks were probably written by men.
Yeah, probably, right? And there are women that go into the doctor and they conceive, and they date. They have the ovulation on day 14, right, to determine when the baby's going to come or, going to be born. So a lot of times when you have these 2 weeks or 2 weeks early or late, it might not be early or late, right? Because they're all going on day 14 ovulation. So the day of ovulation changes. It's not consistent. It can change every month for a woman because of, stress or environment. Your ovaries, they smell the environment. They smell your environment. If they smell stress, if they smell perceived threats, they are not going to release an egg for you to procreate. They're going to say, hey, sorry, but you lost your privilege this month to procreate, because we don't think your child will survive.
That is hilarious.
So a lot of things like delayed ovulation can happen, right? So like I went on a trip to France last month, and because of the jet lag, my body perceived that as stress. So I actually did not ovulate until day 28.
Yeah.
I was very late in ovulating, but because I have my tracker, I knew I wasn't pregnant. I had a 36-day cycle because I had my tracker. I knew that. I knew the day I ovulated because I take my temperature every morning, and I knew I was in control of it. I could understand my body. I could have this open dialogue. And, if you're using the fertility awareness method as your means of pregnancy planning or avoiding, then knowing if you're just using the rhythm method where it's like, oh, my tracker says that the star is on day 14, so I just will avoid sex around 12, 13, 14, and I'll be fine. It's like, no, if I was doing that, I would have gotten pregnant. So it's very important. So ovulation can change every month depending on factors. Sometimes you can have, an anovulatory cycle where you don't even ovulate. And women with PCOS tend to gravitate towards more of those. But ovulation is super important. That's why women really need to get and connected to when they ovulate. So I encourage every single woman to go on their phone right now, download the Kindara app, get a thermometer from the drugstore and chart your thermometer, your temperature in there. Taking Charge of Your Fertility is a great book to start with learning about fertility awareness method. But basically on the day of ovulation, your temperature will drop. And then the next day, your temperature rises. And it stays consistently higher for the rest of your cycle. So when you see your little chart on your Kindara app, it will be a biphasic chart. You'll have your follicular phase, which is the first phase of your pre-ovulatory phase, will be lower temperature readings. And then after you ovulate, bam, they're all above that cover line. So you should be seeing those two beautiful, temperatures that divide. And if you find out you're not ovulating, this is why it's great to chart, because you can see what's going on. If you're not getting pregnant, you can see what's going on. If you have a short luteal phase and you have your period early, like this is all information. It's so invaluable. So to record this and have this dialogue, it's super important.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There was a number of things that came up. One of the things I thought was quite amusing as a man was the perspective that a woman's body can basically sense stress in the environment. And I thought about, this idea of losing your baby making privileges. So for all men, translating what she just said, basically don't, refrain from getting into stressful situations or putting your woman in a stressful situation, because you may lose your privileges for that particular period. And there's actually a deeper nuance to that, though. I mean, it's kind of amusing for all of us that have been through that, but there is a deeper phenomenon with that, because biologically women are not designed to endure the level of stress that men are naturally designed for, right? And that's something that I think is a very interesting phenomenon. I had a great interview with John Gray a while back, and we really dove deep into a lot of different themes around the biological differences between men and women, how that plays into psychology, and just like this idea of men are from Mars, women are from Venus, and then really breaking that down into the biological level. And I want to touch on this particular theme because what you just said is actually quite profound. Biologically, women are not designed to take on and endure as much consistent stress as men do. Obviously, pregnancy is probably the most stressful kind of physical thing that men are not designed to go through, but men are designed to consistently deal with stress as long as we can regain our testosterone. But in the world we live in, there's been a role reversal where a lot of women are taking on the masculinity of potentially the men that have lost masculinity. Maybe they're estrogen dominant or they're impotent or whatever the case is. So I want to talk about that for a second, because I think that's a really, really important key for all women to understand about themselves if they are going too masculine and then taking on more than they can biologically handle.
That's definitely, that is definitely something that you're seeing today. You're right. Women, where our hormones fluctuate throughout the month, depending on which stage of the cycle we're on. And depending on which stage we're a little bit more resilient to stress. And in certain times of the cycle, we're more introverted, we're less resilient to stress. Our hormones are very delicate, and they're constantly changing from, puberty until menopause. Like, they're constantly changing. Whereas men kind of have a more, homeostasis. And, we as women, we follow the pattern of the moon, so our hormones go on a 30-day cycle. Whereas men, you follow the pattern of the sun. You're on a 24-hour day cycle. So you wake up, you have tons of testosterone, you're raring to go. You've got, you eat your power breakfast, you're like, go, go, go. And at the end of the night, your testosterone's fading down. You kind of just want to shut off. I admire men for that. I wish I could just shut my brain off at night and just be like, I'm just ready to wind down and relax. But, how often do you see women are like, working on a project, or they're stimulated, especially if it's a certain type of the cycle. So like ovulation, we get real creative energy. So maybe we want to stay up later. We have more energy and we're doing these things. And then the menstrual phase of the cycle, the last phase, we're more introverted and we're very in tune with our intuition. This is the time where we're bleeding. We're just like really in tune, especially if that falls on a new moon or full moon, which usually does. And, so you've got the energy of the moon as well. So now that we live in this world of unprecedented stress, and you have more women working, you have more women being the breadwinners, you have more women taking it all on, I see that hashtag. It's like, I can do anything, you can do bleeding. And it just kind of makes me cringe. I get the empowerment behind it, but it's like, yeah, but why should we? That's a time for connecting, for journaling, for closing the tasks that we've been working on this past 30-day cycle, and for just, if you have to, if you're a single mom and you got to do it, you got to put food on the table, you got to do that, then you can do it while bleeding, because women are resilient and we're badasses. But if you can just take some self-care and you can do these things for yourself and know, like, hey, this is one of the reasons why charting is so valuable, is because, hey, I'm in my menstrual phase right now and I need to just book a massage, or I need to just not schedule that meeting for tomorrow because, and so harnessing your cycle to your ability, to the best of your ability, basically. So, I see that a lot with, the shift of women into a more yang and more masculine, role. Like, there was this one example of this couple that was trying to conceive, and they just couldn't conceive. They couldn't conceive. And their doctor was telling them, she's a fertility specialist, and she works, she's functional. So she works with diet and lifestyle. And she was like, talk to the, the couple. And she's like, because any fertility specialist, you need to see both male and female. Like, it's not just the woman comes in, right? Like, oh my gosh, like, I won't even see just the woman if it's for optimizing fertility. I want to see both of you, because it takes two. And, like, they're showing 60% of the time it's actually a male infertility problem. So both of them need to be there. So this woman that was working like, crazy hours a week. She was the breadwinner. She was, she felt just very, the husband said she was more controlling, and then he was expressing that, and then she was expressing how she was working too much. And finally this doctor was like, look, you've got to take less time off. You've got to take some time off work, and you've got to also open some space for your husband to take control. You need to work on these aspects and get more yin energy, and give your husband some more yang, and balance it out, and have more of a balance. And they worked on it, and sure enough, a few months later, they conceived after having tried for a long time, and their marriage was much healthier for it as well. And so I'm not saying that women can't do it all and we can't be the breadwinners. I'm not saying women can't be the breadwinners, like, there can't be stay-at-home dads. I think it's beautiful to shift those roles and not have like a set gender role, but it's to kind of have a balance between it,
Yeah. And I think also what we're talking about too is the fundamental masculine, feminine energies that don't necessarily dictate whether you're a man or a woman. Because some women are more dominantly masculine, which they would attract more of a feminine male. And those things can fluctuate and change, just like our hormones and the ovulation cycles. In a man's androgenic cycles as well, andropause is also a key factor. Like menopause, andropause is the male equivalent to like the midlife crisis. What's that all about? Well, that would be a hormonal imbalance or an estrogenizing of the man, where his testosterone has pretty much plummeted, usually because of diet, lifestyle, toxicity, psychological and emotional repression, or whatever the case is. So there's these different cycles that we can fluctuate from, and they're nuanced. In that example that you gave, like, I think it's interesting the roles in society, because society plays such a huge role in these cases. Obviously, environmental toxicity and the xenoestrogens, like we talked about, and the diet is a humongous factor on the biology. But then the lesser talked about thing is like the energetics and the predefined roles that a man is supposed to play and a woman's supposed to play. But maybe energetically, at that phase in your life, maybe the man is actually supposed to be a little more yin, and the woman hasn't. She's been so yin her whole life. Now she's finding that empowerment, or vice versa. It's it's a deep exploration, but I just think that that's a pretty interesting thing to put in there too, as we're exploring all this.
Absolutely. It's about having that balance, and like you're right, some women have more yang and some men have more yin, and that's completely natural. But it's just making sure that it's in balance. Yeah. And then also that each person is supporting one another, and you have that openness between each other, that there's no dominating or no, because like the ovaries will sense that the environment might not be conducive for raising a child and our ovaries are very, very smart.
I can definitely I can definitely relate to that. I can see that. So, with the time we have left, I want to just kind of see where we can go with, because of our environmental toxicity, because of everything that's affecting our hormone rhythms and the chemical signaling of our hormones, or the suppression of our hormones. What can we do to detox the false hormones so we can come back into hormonal harmony?
Okay, absolutely. And that's so important. So after getting off hormonal birth control, whatever form it may be, whether it's a pill or IUD, it is so important to detox the body. It is so important to detox because you have all of this synthetic estrogen built in your system, especially if you've been taking this for years. I mean, and the body is resilient. If you take care of it, it is designed to detox. So it's always important to do some type of cleanse. It's very important. So you've got to go on like a whole foods cleanse. So in my practice, I always put women on the Purium cleanse, detox their body from, alkalize the body, get rid of that chronic inflammation, give the body a chance to cool down, and not feel like it's under perceived stress by the foods that they're eating. And so you've got to supported in order for that to detox the excess estrogen. So after the cleanse, and it's implementing certain diet and lifestyle changes for each woman, and it's individual for each person. It's not like a set diet that I can give for every person, but that is definitely crucial into the process.
Yeah. Well, what if we could probe deeper? Like, what kind of overview or what kind of style of eating do you generally follow, or do you recommend? Is it like more of a plant-based, organic, superfood
It's
type of deal?
It's definitely plant-based. So I don't, I meet my clients halfway. I realize not everyone's vegan. I realize not everyone's vegetarian. I realize not everyone's, so I try to meet them halfway. And my most important take on it is that they are gotta stay away from the gluten. They
Mm.
have to stay away from the sugar. Dairy is not your friend, especially A1 casein. It just increases inflammation. So if people want to eat dairy, I'm always encouraging, if that's their journey and they want to eat dairy, goat cheese, buffalo, grass-raised buffalo mozzarella, that's okay. Goat's products, because there's no lactose in the buffalo or the goat or the sheep. So they've got to get off the inflammatory dairy, the inflammatory gluten, the sugar, alcohol. Women really shouldn't have more than 4 alcoholic drinks a week. It is true. Men can tolerate more alcohol, but it is inflammatory to us. It can throw off our hormones. We really need to stick to 4 drinks a week. And those are all those are foods that are kind of non-negotiable for me. They need to get off those foods. So meeting them halfway, everybody has a trendy diet, paleo, keto. I try not to stick to a philosophy, but one thing I do know is that you are what you eats. So if they are eating, if someone's definitely not a vegetarian and they're going to eat meat, they have to make sure it's from a grass-fed source, because if you're just eating meat with antibiotics and hormones in it, and it's fed corn, then you're gonna have heartburn and acid reflux like these poor cows in the factory farms, and you're gonna get fat quick because of the corn that's in the cows, and you're gonna have antibiotics, you're gonna be less resilient, you're gonna have leaky gut. So it's really important to clean your source of protein.
Yeah.
To
those animals are basically getting hormone replacement therapy too. It's a highly estrogenic. And by the way, alcohol for the most part is also estrogenic, especially beer. Wine, it definitely can trigger that for sure through fermentation. I think that was a brilliant point. And yeah, I totally agree with you, meeting people where they're at, because ultimately, one of the things I figured out a long time ago is this principle of subtraction by addition, which is basically like, you don't just take everything away. People have patterned behaviors, and they have beliefs, and they have a psychology that's in an emotional connection that's wrapped up in their food behavior. So when you take all that away, it's like, for some people, they can do that. Like, some people like me can go all into a raw food diet and just go all in and go into that journey. But it's not like it's not typically the easiest thing. You have to have a certain temperance for that, a certain attitude or certain psychology for that. For most people, it's like, it's baby steps until the momentum has been created. And then at some point, it spills over because somebody actually feels what it is to feel good in their body.
Definitely. And I agree with you. It's a philosophy of adding in, not taking away.
Exactly.
And that approach is a bit better, but they want to get better, and that a lot of times, if they're coming in and they're on their last straw, their last resort, I'm like, you got to take away the gluten. You got to take away the sugar. I'm not saying they can't eat these things ever again, but especially if you're suffering from an autoimmune like Hashimoto's or polycystic ovarian syndrome or endometriosis, which is an inflammatory condition. It's an inflammation. There's not enough research on it yet, but what they're finding is that there's a gut connection. It's an inflammation connection, right? It's like causing this tissue to grow. So they cannot, like gluten. Some women tell me, it's like, oh, I have to take the birth control pill because I have endometriosis. And I'm like, I hear that all the time. And I don't necessarily want to say you haven't tried everything yet, like, and criticize them and put them in that place of shame. But what I just try to encourage them to do is like, you have to actually like before, yes, there are some women that a hormonal form of contraception can ease endometriosis symptoms, but have they tried everything yet? Have they tried literally cutting out gluten, cutting out sugar, cutting out dairy? Because for some people that is very difficult to do, and they don't believe the power behind it, or they do it for like 2 weeks and like, it's not working yet. It's like, we'll give it some more time. It's a much easier to go on a birth control pill. And I understand they can get it and then their periods aren't so painful to where they're vomiting or they're having heavy periods. I get it. That is a horrible, endometriosis is it is not, I feel for those women. It can be painful. However, I have seen so many women put it into remission. So I know, I've seen it, anecdotal experience. Like I have seen these women just change their diet and lifestyle and put it into remission. It no longer controls their life. And so imagine how many women are just taking the birth control pill because they're told it's their only option, but they haven't really explored these avenues yet. So and I'm really looking forward to just the more research that's coming out, the more attention endometriosis is getting, that we're going to have a lot more answers in the years to come. So that's exciting.
Yeah. And I mean, I've seen the same thing of every single case and condition that I know of. I've seen it reverse. I'm not saying that it is everything. There's a lot of different factors. There's even spiritual factors that play into healing.
Absolutely.
For sure. But definitely like endometriosis, for sure. I've seen that completely reversed in a lot of women who simply did do a cleanse, one that you're talking about, and but not just do the cleanse, but then upgrade along the way and transition. The cleanse was like a bridge to transition into an upgraded lifestyle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So actually, like I was talking about how I have polycystic ovarian syndrome. I mean, it's in remission. Like genetically, I have the disposition for it, but I've turned those genes off, right? I am living the most vibrant life. Like I don't look at it as a sentence. I look at it as it saved my life because I am now healthier than I've ever been. And I'm living a vibrant life. I mean, I get to spread this message with women. It's so rewarding. So I had to have this in order to be where I am today and experience this level of life that I'm experiencing now. And it's not something, something like, oh, so you don't eat dairy, or how do you not have ice cream, or how do you not have like bread or whatever? I'm like, it doesn't even faze me because I know the way it makes me feel. I know what it used to be like. And that's all I can feel or see or think when I think about eating foods like that. Like once you live that high vibrational life and once you're eating super foods, like quality foods, you don't want to go back. Eating that ice cream sounds horrible. I feel sorry for them, I'm like, don't feel sorry for me. I'm fine.
Totally. And that's the cosmic giggle of this whole thing, right? Because somebody, if they're so used to something, then they're so attached to it. It's like, oh my God, I could never live without this. And you hear this kind of thing all the time. It's ridiculous, but it's real to that person, because what we know is what you just said, is that if you just go through a short process and you start upgrading and you start actually realizing like, wow, this salad, now that my taste receptors are starting to awaken and they're not so numbed and dulled out, they're starting to awaken. I can taste the full spectrum of flavor in this salad that actually tastes better than the thing that I was eating that was like completely processed and had no life force, had no real flavoring other than the artificial flavoring I put on top of it.
Yeah.
And it's like this whole new world of sensation starts to open up, and it's all natural. It's all what's already been there, but it's like reactivating. In a lot of ways, it's like reactivating the natural human experience. And once somebody's had that, once someone's woken up a little bit, they can go back to sleep. However, when they do, there's a part of them that's awake now. So it's almost like this push and pull. And it's kind of like what Michael Beckwith says is like, you can be pulled by a vision or pushed by pain. And it's like that kind of thing. Like then this kind of new inspiration starts to open up of like, what's possible for my life when I feel really good. I got a taste of it. I got a glimpse of it. But now it's kind of like I always take a spiritual perspective to everything, a metaphysical perspective. It's like that energy that's animating your life, your spirit starts to actually open up and starts to pull you along, whether you're kicking and screaming. It's like it's going to keep pushing that button until you kind of surrender into it and start exploring, what's available on the menu board of nature, so to speak, which in what we're talking about is like your food options, knowing that there's so many more options that are natural and whole foods and superfoods and herbs and different natural based supplements and different things you can do that people have never ever even entertained. They didn't know it was possible. All they knew is there was a dollar menu. That's all a lot of people even know is possible. So I think that's a big thing too, right? Like knowing what's possible, not, for your life, for what you can put in your body, knowing what the options are so you can actually make new decisions.
Absolutely. And it doesn't always happen overnight, like a seed can be planted. Someone can, read something or hear something from a friend or try something. And then, a few years later, they might be in the space to try it. And then they do a little bit. And then maybe a few years later, they read something else or they're exposed, and it's a journey for all of us, and we all are at our own pace. So that's why it's like, there are no lost causes to me. I know lost causes, you just got to live by example and, just really have faith in humanity to elevate into this realm, because it's a great place to be.
Yeah, for sure. It sure beats.
It's our duty to help people. I feel like, I feel this great energy, and oh my gosh, the food I eat makes me feel, oh my gosh, like imagine that. Like my choice of food can make me feel like this or like crappy down here. And so it's like, I remember when I first realized that, in my 20s, and I was like, oh my God, how did I not know this? This is my duty to share with everyone,
Yeah, it's kind of like your challenge is your gift. Your gift in life is wrapped up in the challenge that you're facing. So for yours, going through this situation actually revealed to you a lot about your purpose, right? And what you're here to share with people.
Absolutely. Without a doubt. It was a rocky road. It was a long journey. Unfortunately, I wish if I could have met myself when I was 20, I could have helped her so much. Made my life a little bit easier, but you know what? The learning was in the struggle, and that was all meant to be. And so I'm so grateful for the experience.
That's beautiful. That's amazing. Jenna, this conversation has been absolutely amazing. It's been a pleasure and honor to have you on and really dive into all of this with you. I learned a lot. And I want to obviously let everyone know how they can reach out to you, how they can get more information about your work, any content that you put out there, any resources that you have to share with them. If they want to start going through this process and reach out to you, how can they do that?
Absolutely. So you can visit me over on my site. You'll receive a free copy of my book, 7 Steps to a Healthier You. So you get an ebook, and there's some more health information in there. And I send out a newsletter every week talking about hormones, ovulation, periods, recipes to support you in your journey. So definitely go check out the blog at healthiernotions.com.
Awesome. And is there any parting wisdom that you'd like to share before we click out?
Yes. Women, I know I've already said it, goddesses, download the Kandara app, take your temperature, start connecting with your cycle, with your partner, get him involved too, have him get the thermometer for you and give it to you in the morning, make it a couple's experience, bring him into this, because this is important. If you open this dialogue together, it shouldn't just be the woman's, responsibility. It's something beautiful to, for the male to also know, my partner is ovulating today, or maybe tomorrow is going to be her first day of her period. Maybe I should make dinner for her, bring some flowers home, and it will strengthen your bond. And women too, it will strengthen your bond with your body and your intuition, and you'll see things opening in your life once you're more connected to your cycle. So download the app, do it.
Definitely appreciating those words of wisdom.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. I've really loved being here today. It was awesome chatting with you.
Awesome. Likewise. Thank you so much, Jenna.